On April 2nd, 2025, Lil Wayne opened up pre-orders for his new album, The Carter 6, a little more than 2 months before it would release on June 6th. You could buy the CD, the digital download, a box set merch, or the vinyl. When that date finally came, fans everywhere got the album. And many weren't too pleased with the quality of the music, but that's for a different video. Nobody was complaining about the quantity. Go on Spotify and you'll see that the album has 19 songs, which is pretty much standard for a rap album in 2025. But that's just on Spotify, or Apple Music, or Tidal. Fans started receiving the vinyl that they pre-ordered in April, and they were excited to see that there were 3 exclusive tracks on there: Louisiana Hot Sauce, Geeked with Trippie Redd, and Actin' Funny. But they were probably a little less excited when they realized that the vinyl only has 6 out of 19 of the original songs from the tracklist on it. For $40, Lil Wayne fans bought a vinyl that has just over 1/3 of the album that they were actually buying. And as you might expect, people are mad. There's people on Twitter talking about it. There's a YouTuber named Ali Rodriguez Dolman who made a video called "Lil Wayne might have killed vinyl collecting for me," going on a well-earned rant about how ripped off he feels. And it would be one thing if this was a Lil Wayne specific problem, but just a month or 2 ago, Ali had to post a different video called "The Weeknd Ruined Vinyl Collecting" because The Weeknd did something similar. And these are 2 of many examples. Why is this happening? Why are the vinyl releases coming out incomplete? When is it a cute quirk, and when is it ripping off your fans? How are the artists benefiting at all from this? We're gonna get into all that. But first, if you like videos on music like this one, I really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week, and if you want to see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in that broadcast channel 1 day early for free. Also wanted to say thanks to everyone who's checked out my group Elmjack's latest song, Get It How You Live. If you like the instrumental playing in the background, that should give you an idea of what it sounds like. I'll put the link to stream it in the description. And I, HADJI Gaviota, am going on tour this summer with a couple really great artists: Damage, Rob Apollo, Shno Xavier. If you live in the West Coast, the Midwest, or New York, there's a pretty good chance I'm coming to your city. The dates are on the screen. Ticket link is in the description. Can't wait to see you there. Let's get back to the video. The short answer to why artists are doing this to their fans right now is because of record sales. But to understand how and why, we need to take a look at how record sales are calculated. The history of the Billboard charts goes back over a century at this point. In July 1913, they published a list called Last Week's 10 Best Sellers Among the Popular Songs. Very catchy name, which is the same kind of idea as today's top 10, but functionally it was a lot different because this was for sheet music. The business of recorded music was nowhere near what it is today. Although it did exist back then, people had the gramophone, which is like that old ass looking thing with the big ass horn sticking out of it, which was invented in the late 1800s. It wasn't something that everybody had in their house though. So buying recorded music was a bit more niche. In the 1920s and the 1930s, the technology of recording music onto discs that could then be easily sold and reproduced got a lot better. But it was during the Great Depression. So when there was a 25% unemployment rate in the United States, there weren't a ton of people going out like, let me buy this big hunk of metal. So adapting the new technology was maybe a bit slower than you might expect. Even though these discs were on sale starting in like 1930, it wasn't until 1936 that Billboard started publishing a list of the best-selling records. By 1940, Billboard had a full spread of different charts, including things like jukebox play, retail sales, sheet music sales, and radio play. In 1955, somebody smart was like, we should just combine all these things into one big list. And they published their first top 100 singles list, which later would be rebranded as Hot 100. Billboard was also starting to track albums separately, with a 10-album list beginning in 1956, eventually expanding into the 200-album list that we see today in 1967. So you might ask, how exactly does Billboard know how many albums are sold? Well, from 1967 to 1991, it was on the stores to just report how many copies that they sold from the shipments they would get. That system was, as you might imagine, a little bit flawed. Labels, of course, wanted the sales to look as high as possible. Derek Thompson wrote a great book called Hitmakers that came out in 2017 that talks a lot about what this used to be like, but as you might imagine, they would grease the fingers here and there to make sure that those counts looked how they wanted them to look. In 1991, this all changed when Billboard partnered with Nielsen SoundScan. Now, albums were measured at the point of sale, when the barcode scans at the cash register. There was no more store owner there to just fit the numbers to whoever's agenda. Before Nielsen, labels could control the narratives on who were their best-selling artists. But after Nielsen, it was revealed that people were buying different albums than what Billboard or what the labels were telling us. This was a huge moment for genres that were once cast off into the fringes, like hip-hop, leading to a bunch of #1 albums from rappers. in the 90s, like Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style. Today, hip-hop is one of the most dominant genres chart-wise, but that didn't start until Nielsen. This peak of accurate album sale numbers coincided with about a decade of what is really the peak of commercial physical album sales. Some of the numbers you'll see in this section are like unfathomable today if you're not Taylor Swift or Adele. The year 2000 has 4 albums that are on the top 10 of the best first week album sales ever. Britney Spears' Oops, I Did It Again with 1.3 million first week. Backstreet Boys' Black and Blue with over 1.5 million copies first week. Eminem's The Marshall Mathers LP with almost 1.8 million copies in its first week. And NSYNC's No Strings Attached with damn near 2.5 million copies sold in its first week. Double platinum, almost triple platinum the week it came out. But this would all come crashing down with the rise of the internet. Digital piracy through programs like Napster or LimeWire made it easier to just download whatever you felt like downloading for free. Even if you were a sucker who was still paying for music online, you could just buy individual singles on iTunes instead of taking the plunge and buying the entire album. As a result, annual music sales revenue dropped from almost $15 billion in 1999 to about $6.3 billion in 2009. The industry was in big trouble, but there was a savior right around the corner. The executives and the tech bros linked up and came up with streaming. Give us $10 and you can listen to anything you've ever wanted to listen to, unlimited, wherever you are, as long as you've got internet. And so the last 10 to 15 years of music consumption have been all about the dominance of streaming. Companies are back making money, although whether the artists are is a totally different question. That's another video. The supernova of streaming created a new problem for Billboard. How are we supposed to quantify this thing on the charts? Nobody was actually buying albums, but we have to come up with something to explain whose songs are getting consumed the most. At the end of 2014, Billboard came up with something called album equivalent units. According to their methods, 10 digital downloads, like purchases on iTunes, or 1,500 streams would count as one album sale. In 2018, they got a little bit more nuanced about free versus paid streams and how many of those converted to an album unit. So if you had a paid account, like a paid Spotify account and Apple Music Premium, it's only 1,250 streams to be an album equivalent unit. But if it's a free stream on a free Spotify account or a view on a YouTube video, it takes 3,750 to count as an album sale. The awkward period before they invented that stat in the first half of the 2010s, where it was becoming more and more common for customers to just be completely digital in terms of their music consumption, but album sales still mattered to artists. You would get these videos of like J. Cole buying like 3 copies of his album in a Best Buy, the way that like a politician goes to like vote for himself on election day. But that period was over. And much like how before 1991 they would schmooze the record store owners to try to get the numbers to look how they wanted them to look, labels found ways to use the current streaming economy to make things go how they wanted it to go. The craziest example of this, of course, is the stream farm economy, where bots artificially stream people's songs so that their numbers look better. Not everything was this sinister though. A good early example of something that's a little bit more innocent is Drake's album Views in 2016. There's 19 like cohesive songs, and then track 20 is Hotline Bling, which is a song he just like played on his radio station that became like a viral meme sensation and then became a huge hit. But if you're Drake or you're his label, you're like, if you take that song and put it at the end of the track list, all of those streams count as album sales, thus making your first week numbers look better. This is not a Drake exclusive thing. Plenty of artists have done this since, but it was the first example that came to mind. Even though these album equivalent units are like kind of imaginary in some sense, you're not actually selling like physical copies of something, artists and labels still care a ton about going number one. Larry Miller, the director of the music business program at NYU, said exactly that to Rolling Stone in 2019. If you talk to any artist or label president ever, even with all of the changes in the way that people discover and listen to music, being number one is still really important, not just to the labels, but to the artists themselves. And if you think about it, it does make sense for all the stakeholders involved to care about that. For artists, beyond just the pride of going number one, it's a selling point. It helps them book bigger venues, book higher festival slots, and ask for more money. For label employees, if your artist goes number one, it makes it look like you actually did something. And you can go back to the bigwigs and the investors and make it look like you're killing it, maybe even get a promotion. In the second half of the 2010s, as streaming's hold on the music industry tightened, there were forms of what I like to call sales farming that look even more egregious. The bundle era. Good times. Artists and their labels realized that if you were selling merch, which is something that so many artists do, and you just tacked an album onto it, it would count as an album sale. And this was common practice for a lot of artists in this period, but it became a battleground when Travis Scott and Nicki Minaj were competing for #1 with their albums Astroworld and Queen in 2018. Both artists were selling tons of bundles to try to boost their sales. Travis was selling hoodies, vinyl, hats, tees, with digital albums included, while Nicki, according to the Rolling Stone article about it in 2019, was selling a t-shirt and album bundle for only $15. Clearly, artists were not making money with those kinds of margins. This is like the kind of thing just done to boost your numbers. After Travis ended up coming in first, Nicki tweeted, "What we're not gonna do is have this auto-tune man come up in here selling sweaters and telling y'all he sold 500,000 albums, because he didn't." In many ways, this was the breaking point for the bundle era. At the end of 2019, Billboard decided to establish some new rules. From January 3rd, 2020 onward, in order for an album sale to be counted as a part of a merch or an album bundle, all the items in that bundle must be available to purchase concurrently and individually on the same store. So basically, if you're selling like a t-shirt and a digital album, then the digital album has to be up for sale, and it also has to be cheaper than the t-shirt and digital album bundle. And the t-shirt also has to be available without the album bundle. Does that make sense? This rule wasn't enough to stop artists from bundling away. So 6 months later, Billboard scrapped it and added even more rules. Now, all albums that get bundled with merchandise or concert ticket sales must be promoted as an a la carte add-on to those purchases in order to be counted as album sales. So basically, you can't just click one button and have one thing in your cart that includes both the merch and the album. You needed to buy those two things separately, hit add to cart on two different things. And there was one more rule that they added then, which is something that's really important to the issue that we're seeing in this video today. Only when the physical item is shipped will it be counted in Billboard's official album tallies. So if someone buys your t-shirt album bundle, but you don't ship the t-shirt until the second week, that sale is not going to count in your first week sales. While the peak of the bundle era is over, in 2023, Billboard introduced something called the fan pack, which let artists and labels count two distinct packages towards the sales, like a CD and a t-shirt, or a sweater and a vinyl or something like that. Like they could designate two of those things to count towards their album sales, but all the individual items still have to be available on their own as well. The big difference now is that digital downloads don't count in those situations either. So if your goal is to get higher album sales, you need to sell fans physical copies of the album. And the three most common types of physical copies are the vinyl, the CD, and the cassette. The latter two, nobody really listens to, and most people aren't that interested in collecting anymore, which leaves us with one. The original popular form of recorded music has somehow survived into the modern day. What was once phased out by easier and more portable technologies had a resurgence during the hipster era of the 2000s. Annual vinyl sales increased 85% from 2006 to 2007, and then by 89% again from 2007 to 2008. What makes vinyl so collectible is it appeals to two very distinct groups of music fans. Some see it as the true audiophile's way to listen to music, and there are producers in hip-hop especially who love crate digging and sampling right off a vinyl record. There are some bars in fancy neighborhoods that will DJ only vinyl. Other buyers don't even open the vinyl. They just keep it on display like a collector's item. A Luminate report in 2024 said that 50% of people who had bought a vinyl in the last 12 months don't even own a record player. But while the other forms of physical music have mostly come and gone, there remains an audience happy to pay the artist for a vinyl, even if they're doing it for completely different reasons. But with this comes some issues. For one, producing a vinyl is not nearly as easy as producing a cassette or a CD. There's a reason why they invented those things. It's more expensive, it takes longer, and there are supply issues that can make it really difficult to meet the demand. In 2022, Grammy.com reported that some plants had a 9 to 12 month wait on delivering orders. There were rumors around then that huge artists like Taylor Swift were clogging up the pipeline at these vinyl factories because they just were ordering so many copies and it takes a long time to make them. It's hard to say exactly how true that is, but one thing that is definitely true is that it takes a long time to make a vinyl. Some people might say, well, okay, so it takes a while, so why don't you just put up a pre-order and then ship it out whenever it's ready, you know? I'm happy to wait 6 months for the vinyl to come. I can just listen to the album on Spotify until then. We have to go back to that Billboard rule in 2020. Remember, the sales only counted when the physical item would ship. And if artists care a lot about having these big first week album sales, then they need to ship the vinyl on that first day. And that's where the issue is. Travis Scott's 2023 album Utopia has been back in the press recently, thanks to his budding beef with Pusha T, who dissed him on the latest Clip song because he was mad that Travis butted into his studio session with Pharrell to show him the album, and played them the song Meltdown without Drake's verse on it, and then Drake's verse went on to contain some pretty scathing disses towards Pharrell. Travis's defense, or at least the defense that his fans are using, was that Drake's verse wasn't even on the song yet at the time that Travis was in the studio with Pusha and Pharrell, and he had no way of knowing what Drake was going to say. How is that relevant to this video? Well, Travis, who's formerly Mr. Bundle Man himself and once sold a motorcycle helmet as a part of a bundle, got some praise in a 2024 Billboard article because he pressed 500,000 vinyl copies of Utopia to ship on the first day that the album came out. Utopia went on to move 496,000 units in its first week, which is by far the biggest rap album of that year. For big A-list artists who have their shit together, this is a great way to do huge first week numbers. Taylor Swift did the same thing that year and did like unfathomable numbers. Her 1989 Taylor's Version vinyl sold 1.4 million copies alone in 2023. But Travis's vinyl has one issue. There's no Meltdown on it. There's no Drake feature. The song was replaced by a different song on the vinyl. And the reason is, Drake really did record that verse last minute. Travis wasn't lying. Meaning that because Travis chose to print out 500,000 copies of the vinyl to be ready on release day, the whole thing had to be turned in months ago. And even for these bigger artists signed to major labels, probably get to cut the line at the vinyl plant and get it done as fast as possible, it's still gonna take a month or two. So he had to turn in a copy of the album, and then he ended up changing the album before it actually came out. He's not alone in this issue. In fact, his former rival, Nicki Minaj, ran into quite the issue with her release of her album Pink Friday 2 that same year. When the vinyl shipped, it included only 10 of the 22 songs that were on the original release, but she still charged fans $33 for it. People on Reddit were complaining, and yet this issue has only intensified since then. Beyonce's 2024 album Cowboy Carter had the vinyl ship with 5 songs missing. This problem has continued into 2025, when The Weeknd shipped the vinyl for his final album Hurry Up Tomorrow with only 11 out of 22 of the songs on it. 2024 also gave us maybe the craziest example of vinyl fraud, when French Montana was selling $5 vinyl pre-orders for his album Mac and Cheese 5. The infamous one that had like 125 songs on it with like clean versions and remixes and slowed downs and sped ups and whatever. But then he sent those vinyl to the wrong addresses or just never sent them at all. People were complaining all over Reddit, which led a lot of people to ask, did you really buy a French Montana vinyl? And I actually tried to see if there are even any copies that exist. And there is one copy for sale on Discogs for $50, and honestly, I'm kind of tempted to pull the trigger. The reason these incomplete vinyl are getting shipped out now is that in the digital age, artists got accustomed to working on their albums till the last minute, the literal last minute, sometimes over the last minute. In the even pretty recent past, artists had to turn in their albums a couple weeks in advance before they would drop so that they can make CDs. But now, artists like Drake and Playboi Carti will go past midnight mixing the album, adding songs, maybe even recording brand new songs right there and then. This is mostly fine for customers, I guess, but I will say that sometimes these big A-list albums feel a little bit rushed and bloated, or the mixes aren't as good as you would think they would be. And part of this is because artists know that they can just change the mix on Spotify. When it comes to shipping out physical products though, it's a little bit ridiculous. These botched vinyl releases have been branded as first pressings as a way to add this sense of rarity to the product, even though it's an incomplete product. And for collectors who care about things like rarity and uniqueness, I guess there is some kind of value in that. But from a consumer standpoint, artists, or maybe their labels, are ripping off fans and selling them an inferior product at the full price. The Lil Wayne example is just the latest and one of the more egregious in a long line of artists who are trying to have their cake and eat it too in terms of vinyl releases. What the labels are selling is like a physical commodified version of slop. They're telling themselves in the meetings, well, what audiophile is buying the Carter 6 on vinyl and can't wait to listen to the whole thing? They saw the statistic that 50% of vinyl buyers don't even have a player. And they were like, we could probably just get away with it. And they're right for most of the people who buy it. But there are still people who are paying for an album that they were going to listen to, and they're not getting the full product. And I think that's wrong. So how do we fix this? I would say that the best answer is for fans to just stop buying these vinyl pre-orders for these big A-list artists until they demonstrate that they're not going to do this. The best way to vote on decisions of these big companies is with your wallet. But more realistically, a lot of these fans probably don't even know they're being shipped something inadequate, or they'll just never actually open the vinyl and find out. So what should happen here, in my opinion, is good old-fashioned regulation. I think that Billboard should create another rule, that if the album that gets shipped is missing a certain percentage of the final album that ends up on streaming services, it shouldn't count as an album sale in the reporting. It's up to the executives and the bigwigs to get together and focus group like what percentage of the album that should be. They're not paying me, so I don't know. I don't want to sit here and think too long. Maybe like 80%. If the vinyl doesn't contain at least 80% of the album that's on streaming services, doesn't count as a unit. And look, if you make new songs in that time period between turning it in and having it come out, make them the deluxe version or something. Like, make a new way of releasing that. Do a deluxe vinyl if fans really want that, with a different cover. I don't know. But at least it wouldn't be as lazy as this. I will always have a sympathetic slant towards artists because I am one myself. I've made vinyl before. They're expensive as hell. It's a difficult business to get into. And I know that fans are on your neck for you to drop music as fast as possible, and they do nothing but complain. And it's gotten worse and worse with people wanting you to drop like tons of songs because it just goes out into the ether and disappears. So you really want to like drop so that you can drop again. So you don't want to sit on an album for 2 months. I get it. I do. So a part of me wants to be like, it's not the artists, it's the labels. But I don't know, man. These are big artists. They're in the driver's seat of a lot of these conversations. As much as they don't want us to say that, they probably are. They can definitely just say, I'm not ready to do a vinyl yet. Let's do a pre-order. Or let's wait 2 months so that this can come out then. They need to see some pushback so that they can do better in the future. That's where I'm at. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you want me to cover next. Peace.